Welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about the new UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, and the challenges he faces. Joining us is Zhang Xiaoan. She served as a counselor to the Chinese permanent mission to the United Nations. Raghida Dergham is the founder and executive chairman of the Beirut Institute. Chris Whatley is the executive director of the Association of the United States. And Hugh Dugan served in the US Diplomatic Corps for over 30 years. Let's get back to our panel right now. And Chris, Antonio Guterres has described himself as a bridge builder and messenger for peace. Is that wishful thinking, or does he have those qualities to bring, very disparate views at the United Nations together?
I think it's more than wishful thinking. I think it is his background. It's his resume. He comes to the UN as a head of government, as his experience as Prime Minister of Portugal. So he's used to bridge building within a political context. He's used to working with fellow heads of state at the highest level. He has direct experience managing one of the largest, most complex, most important UN humanitarian agencies. And his focus in his first days in office has been on conflict prevention, on mediation. He will soon be on a plane to Geneva to help address negotiations around Cyprus. I think he's putting his attention on the points of the globe where it's needed, and I think it reflects his vision as Secretary General.
Raghida, talking about the first days of the new Secretary General, he has pledged to fill half the top leadership positions at the UN with women. He's already done so. He's already named 3 women to top UN posts, including Amina Mohammed, the Nigerian Environment Minister. How significant is this on the one hand, and how much of a departure is it from previous leaders of the UN?
Well, and Antonio Guterres may be feeling a little bit guilty because it was supposed to be a woman in his job, and he was the point of consensus for many different reasons. So certainly he should be having, as a deputy, a woman, and he will. Certainly he should have to raise the number of women serving in top positions, and there are many qualified women for that. Look, I want to tell you, this is my 6th, if you will forgive me to brag about this. This is my 6th Secretary General. I started working, I was based at the UN starting with let's see now, 76, who was there? Can't remember who was it in that time, but this is my 6th, Waldheim, it was Waldheim actually. Yes. I caught Waldheim at the very end, and then here is Antonio Guterres, the man who is very different from the men before. He does come from the organization, like Kofi Annan did, but he is also coming from a background of statesman. He's coming also from the background of a man who has reached the hearts of people whom he served, that is to say the refugees. So he's got this experience, and he is a very astute politician. He knows what to do, and I know him personally, and I think he has this humble approach. He is someone who remains in touch with people in a very humble way, but he does not lose track of what he wants to leave behind. He is in his 70s. He will be serving maybe 10 years, not only 5 years, and he can dare to say and do more than the others, and he probably will, because there is that moral leadership that he will uphold. It calls on him to do that in these difficult times when the United Nations is being challenged continuously to say, where are you when what's happening in the world is taking place? Get back your moral leadership. Do not only hide behind the Security Council, because as Secretary General, you have the right, you are independent. You can use that position and show leadership if you choose to. Right. And he will.
Chris, looking at Guterres' personal life, his personal history, if you like, I was reading a very short biography of him, and it says that he spent his time as a young man in the Portuguese countryside, living with relatives, and that's where he came in contact with rural poverty. He spent some time going into very low-income areas in Portugal teaching mathematics. He didn't want any publicity about this. He said, I don't want the cameras there, I don't want microphones there, this is what I am going to be doing. Which is why I guess he's been described in many places as a humanitarian. But what does that bring to his outlook?
Well, I think that it also translates into how he interacts with the UN staff at the Secretariat itself, and that because he's come from within the UN system, not in New York, out in one of the humanitarian agencies, but he brings that kind of humanity that was shown in his work as the head of the UN Human Rights Refugee Agency. He brings that same sense of humanity, I believe, into his interactions with the Secretariat staff. And that is key in that, as Hugh said, ultimately, he's the chief administrator of the UN system. He doesn't have the same advantage that Kofi Annan had of coming from within the building, but he has a spirit of cooperation, of humanity, of a humble demeanor in trying to achieve big goals in reform, in addressing conflict. But that means bringing people along with you and using that great staff that he has and the resources he can call upon. And I think that will play out in his term in how he works with the International Civil Service.
Right. Hugh, the United Nations is dependent on its member states financially. The US is a huge contributor to United Nations funds. Will that come under threat under a Donald Trump administration here?
Well, we don't know what's actually happening. The president-elect is not yet president. There's often concern in Washington about whether the U.S. gets results for its UN participation. This is not a function merely of the White House. We have a legislative branch which controls the purse strings. And in fact, they were the ones that withheld our dues about 16 years ago. It seems that about almost every 15 years, the level of frustration in Washington grows to the point where they decide that the only way to get the attention of the world body after trying to persuade it otherwise is to withhold its dues to see if reform and improved processes can't be instituted. This happened in 1985. It happened in about the year 2000 when the U.S. had gone into arrears of about $1 billion. Now, the UN was able to survive that time of financial constraint, but the real question left on everyone's mind is, does this mean the UN becomes irrelevant if the world's major superpower seems to be so dissatisfied and willing to let it languish a bit in public because of its failings administratively? So this is why it's so important that the new Secretary General takes on these responsibilities as Chief Administrative Officer right away. And I caution that it's easy for us in the world to lay on his shoulders all of the political difficulties and controversies and expect magic answers from this one person. It's not fair. We have to realize his independent political authority comes quite second to his administrative responsibilities.
Zhang Xiaoan, the new Secretary General, was recently interviewed by Newsweek magazine, and he told that magazine that the United Nations in future must, and I'm quoting here, focus on delivery rather than process, on people rather than bureaucracy, and have a culture of accountability with effective protection for whistleblowers. What does that tell you about his management style, what he brings to the UN?
I think, according to my understanding, Guterres is a very much down-to-earth person. He is very pragmatic and very attach a great importance on the delivery and result-based. So he is very practical in his work. And since he has been working in the in the refugee issues, he has been in the fields for many times, and he talked to people, and he would like to listen to all the voices from the society to get the first-hand information. So I think he has a strong will to make UN a better future. So I hope that with his strong will and his effort, together with the member states, he will make a difference of UN.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us.